Oh, hello. Okay, friends. So, in the last video, I showed you my approach for turning ChatGPT's login and sign up screen into native Figma frames and layers. We already practiced several skills, including Figma Autolayout, components, instances, even defining color styles here, and using the color picker, which, as a reminder, has to do with changing the fill. So, going here and using this little eyedropper tool. We also learned how to go to Chrome and use the Chrome inspect tool. So if you right click any page and hit inspect, or the hotkey is also Command Option I to toggle on this developer console. You'll see that you'll be able to see all the HTML and CSS for a given website. So all the HTML is here, all the CSS is defined here in the console here. And since the last video, you can see I made some very small tweaks to the login and sign up screen. Namely, I changed the colors. So I changed the color of the login and sign up buttons. Originally, they were a bit darker, but I made them a bit brighter just so that they mirrored the actual buttons in the website here. Okay, you'll also notice that on hover, these buttons get darker. So that's what I'm going to do first in this video. And then we're going to tackle the next screen, which is sort of this welcome back sign-in screen. All right, so let's get started here. So the first thing I want to show you is that I have this button component in Figma. And in the last video, I showed you how how components are really powerful, right? You can kind of insert a instance of this component anywhere on the canvas. And if I were to change something about the original fill, let's say I made this much darker, it would change all the other buttons here as well to be that color, right? So let me hit Command Z to undo. And the other thing is, if I change the label of the parent component, it would change all the child instances to use also that label, right? But I don't want to do that either, so I'm going to hit Command Z, undo. So one thing I want to introduce is this concept of variant. So what is a variant? Basically, a variant is another option. If I click Add Variant, so I click this parent component frame, and then I click this Add Variant icon at the very top. Basically what I'm defining is a different state for this button. So this state is going to be called my hover state, and then this is going to be my default state. And then at the component level, I'm going to define this property as state. So these buttons are these button instances have a default state, and they have a hover state, right? But let's actually change the hover state slightly. What do I want to do with this? Well, let's go back to this website here. If I inspect this button and I change the hover to be toggled on, I should be able to find the RGB value of RGB to hex. It is 1A7F64. So the way I did that again was I clicked this particular HTML element, which is the button. Over in the Styles tab here, I toggled on hover, and toggling on hover changes the state of the button. And then I went to Computed, and I went and found the background color of the button, 26127 for RGB, and then the hex value is 1A7F64, and then I'm going to change this fill to that hover color, which is a darker green, basically. All right, so now I have this button. If I want to change it from the default state to the hover state, I can do that just like that using this drop down. And basically, this is a state drop down, which I defined again, to recap, inside the parent component, if you add a property, in this case I have only one property called state with two values, default and hover. That's how basically you can get a state drop down here. These are property drop downs. Every component has several properties, and the component variants inherit those properties, and you can define them. And that's really how components and instances all ladder up and work together. And basically, if I wanted to, I can, because this is also using the same component, and this is an instance, I can change this to show, oh, okay, if someone were to hover on the sign up button, it would look like this. It would be slightly darker than the login button, right? Don't worry if you didn't understand all of that just yet. We're going to have multiple opportunities to practice components, component variants in the next couple videos. All right, so moving on. So now I'm going to move on and design this sign in screen. And if you notice, the sign in screen has broadly 3 sections. So what I'm going to do is copy this guy, paste it out here, and get my red triangles, or excuse me, red rectangles going on. So you can notice that there's about 3 sections here. There's like a topmost section, and right now the way I did that was I used a rectangle R to create a rectangle, and then I'm going to invert the rectangle using Shift X, change the stroke to 8, and then change this to a red color. So broadly speaking, this screen has like a header, right? It has a main section here, and it also has a footer section. Oops. Duplicate this and bring it down. Oops. So this is the header, and I'm going to duplicate it, and this is like a footer section at the bottom. Okay, so broadly this page has 3 sections, and then the main section in the middle here kind of has 2 sections even within the section. So I'm going to duplicate this triangle. The first half of this middle section is a welcome back. There's an email address, a continue button, and a don't have account sign up little link here. And then within this section, there underneath this section is the continue with Google, continue with Microsoft, continue with Apple, and in the middle section is this like or, right? The internet is really just a bunch of boxes put together, and that was the purpose of this illustration. Is I made all these rectangles. I'm going to relabel them all to boxes, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of main boxes, and that's sort of how I'm going to tackle this, right? So if I go back to this website, ChatGPT, and log in, this is the particular screen that we're going to work with, right? So right out the gate, I want to kind of inspect the screen a little bit and see how much spacing they have. So it looks like they have 32 space above. So I'm going to just remind myself here, 32, and change this also to a red. 32 space at the top here, and then let's see, about 80 space for the main section, both top, bottom, and left and right. And then let's have a look down here. Down here there's 12 at the top, 24 at the bottom. So 12 pixel at the top, 24 at the bottom. And then how big are these fonts? This is 14. There's 14, and there's 10 margin left and right. So this is 14 pixels. and then 10 on the left and the right. Okay, and I'm sort of just leaving comments here, or text layers here, just so I remember to apply those changes later in the road. And then let's see, what color is this? 10837F. I believe that is still the same color as this over here. A7F. This is 7F. So I'm going to make sure I use that same green, which I'm going to define this as a color style. So I'm going to create a new variable called light green. That way I have a light green, a dark green. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone this guy. And I did that using Command D to duplicate. So I have my, I'm not starting from scratch anymore. And that would be a general recommendation, is to never start from scratch if you don't have to. So this is the sign in screen. All right, and the first thing to note is everything here is white. Okay, and then the terms of use, these two links here, oops. The gray here, terms of use, holding down shift to select both of these. This needs to be light green because that's what it was up here. All right. And then let's see, this border in between, what color is this border here? The border is 10, 110, 110, 128, RGB to hex. Okay, so that's looking a bit better. And we don't want this top section, so we'll just get rid of that for now. And let's see, let's finalize this footer. There's supposed to be 24 spacing at the bottom, so I changed it to 1224. And then because this is inside a frame, I'm going to push it down. You can push things around using Option W to push things up, S to push things down, A and D to push things left and right. And that's on Mac, and you just have to hold down Option and then use WASD. Okay, so we have the footer. I'm going to grab the header. The header is really easy. It's just the logo here. So let's see if we put in this logo, and right now everything is white, but we want it to be black. And then I'm going to put this inside of a frame. Yep, inside of a frame. And this vector, I'm going to change the fill to fix width. So I'm going to make it the width of the frame. So I change it to a fixed width because I want it to only fit the width of this parent frame called ChatGPT sign in, and then I want it to be in the middle like that. And then let's see, we said there was 32 pixels of spacing at the top, so 32 like that. Okay, so now we have the top and the bottom, and now the meat is sort of this messy middle. What I'm going to do first is tackle these buttons here. So you might be asking, Carl, where are you going to get these icons? Well, I have just the thing. So if you go to Figma, go to your home and click Explore Community. Community is really a resource that you really want to tap. So if I search for something like social icon, social login button, like this, you'll be able to find very, very similar assets for what you are basically trying to design. So in this case, this is the social login buttons 2023 created by someone named Amy. And if I open this in Figma, I'll be able to access all the hard work that Amy put in up front, all the components here, and there you go. These are the icons that I'm interested in using. And so when I go to the website, you'll notice that they all start with continue with, and then Google, Microsoft, or Apple. They have, this button has its own hover state, its own border radius. Let's have a closer look. So it looks like there's 52 pixels of padding on the left, 8 pixels of space on the right at a minimum. These buttons, how big are these buttons? These buttons are 320 in width. So let's start with some of that. I'm going to grab these icons. There's Microsoft, Google, and Apple. Microsoft, Google, and Apple. Okay, and now I'm going to kind of make a component out of this. So let's make a component, continue with, and let's find out the color of this. So it's not exactly black, it's 2D333A, 2D333A. Continue with Google. Through that text layer into Autolayout using Shift A, and then I knew that there's 8 pixels of spacing on the left and the right at least. There might be more. We'll just have to adjust for that. The button should be 52 pixels in height, so let's change this a little bit to see if we can get that number up. 51. Let's stay with 18 pixels for now. And then there's going to be a icon inside here, like that. And we're going to center, align left, all the contents. And then let's see how much space is there. So this icon here is going to be its own sort of 52 pixel square. So let's change that to see icon. (52 pixel square), and then center this guy. And then we are going to get rid of the spacing here. Get rid of the spacing here, and just make sure there's 8 pixels of spacing on the left. We're also going to add a stroke. Start with a dark gray and then detach that. I think this is much lighter gray. So if we search for border here, you'll notice the border is 194, 200, and so C2C8D0. Okay, and then let's add some border radius. I'm assuming it's 4 pixels. It might not be, but we'll start with that. So that's the continue with Google button. And it also has to be 320 pixels wide. So 320 wide by default. 320 wide by default. And then how big is the font here? 16 pixels. This needs to be 16 pixels. There we go. Okay, so now we're in business. This is another button. This is a sign in button. Sign in button. Okay, and this is the Google one. So let's turn this into a component, and then let's add a variant. So this is the sign in buttons. Let's change the property here to company. And then let's define this one as the Google one. Google, this one's going to be Microsoft. And then let's add another one, will be Apple. Okay, so continue with Microsoft account. And then continue with Apple. Okay, so you'll notice that by default it tried to add these icons inside, and this frame here, this is the icon frame. I'm also going to relabel this to icon, this one also icon, so it's a lot clearer. And then this one I'm going to switch to a different icon. See if I can find Apple icon. Boom, it is the Apple icon, except I need Microsoft here. And what I'm doing here is drilling down to the icon layer and swapping it using the swap instance aspect of Figma. Find Apple, and Apple is there, right? And that all works because I have these icons that Amy so helpfully made for us. Okay, so this is icons, and I'm going to put these icons here, and I have this wonderful sign-in button here. Let's change the fill of this to white so it's easier to see. Okay, and then now we're getting somewhere. So now I'm going to add the sign-in button, not the regular button, just the sign-in button here. This is Google, Microsoft, and Apple. So Google, Microsoft, and Apple. And how much space is there between these guys? Grid, space. There's about 8 pixels of space between these three. So let's apply that. These are sign-in button group. And then this is going to be Microsoft and then Apple. Okay, and let's center this on the page. So we're getting somewhere. Okay, so in a nutshell, what I just did was create the sign-in button with all the variants, and I really used this social login buttons community file as a starting point. Okay, next I'm going to create the divider and then the top section where it says welcome back. So let's start with the divider. So there's an OR here. How big is this OR? This OR is 12 pixels, and it is a particular off black, not completely black, but off black. I think it's the same as this one. So I'm going to define the style actually as off black. Okay, so then I can actually update all the selected here to be off black. Okay, so this is going to be off black. Okay, and then let's see, there's these lines that are extending out. There's also 24 pixels of space above. So let's put this into a auto layout. 24 pixels of space above, 0 elsewhere. And then inside this frame, there's going to be a rectangle. So the way I added this 100 by 100 is hit R and just tap, and that'll give you a straight square. But this is going to definitely be just 1 pixel in height. Okay, and let's see, this is 320 in total. The span itself is 44.5 pixels. So it looks like they're using some sort of dynamic CSS here to define the width of the lines and the space between these two, between the OR. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw these guys in an auto layout, center this. So this is my divider. And then I'm going to duplicate this on both sides. And then now I see that this entire thing needs to be 320 pixels. So this parent frame here contains my divider, and I'm going to have the divider fill the space along with both of these lines here. And then by default I have sort of just 8 pixels of space defined for the divider to the left and the right. And divider is inside of a frame called frame 1 with 24 pixels on top. So something like that. So I'm going to assume it's both 24 pixels on top and 24 pixels on the bottom here. And then we'll push these guys 3. So you can actually push layers around using shift up and down a specific amount. Right now I'm pushing it by 8 pixels at a time, and you can set that by searching for pixel nudge amount. Yeah, so big nudge is 1 pixel, or excuse me, big nudge right now is 8 pixels, small nudge is 1. And the way that's defined is a small nudge is if you just use your keyboard, up, down, left, right, that's 1 pixel at a time. If you hold down shift, that's big nudge. And right now I have my big nudge defined as 8 pixels. So Command P, type nudge amount, and that's how you can find the nudge there. Okay, we're almost done. Don't have an account, sign up. So I'm going to paste that here. And then remove the underline. Change the font size to 14. Change this to be the green that we all know. And then this is the black, or off black. Okay, things are starting to get, are definitely starting to add up here. So I'm going to change this layout so that everything here is adding up. Okay, the space here between these two isn't enough. It should be 24. Like that. And then there's the big button, and then under the button is 24 as well. So let's add a button. How big is this button? It's 320 pixels and it's 52 in height. So I'm going to manipulate this button that we defined a little bit and fill the container, which makes it 320 by default. The font size is 16. In this case it's 12, so let's update that. And this is going to read continue. Okay. Looking good. Let's add that welcome back. This is 32 pixels and bold. And let's throw all this into a frame. Okay, we're definitely getting there. I know I'm speeding through this. Okay, so the last thing to design really is this email address input. So how big is this input? It's also 52 pixels, and it's got 16 pixels of spacing on the left and the right. So let's do that. Email address. And the placeholder text here, font size, is 16. So let's change this now to bold, 16. Add auto layout, 16 pixels on the left and the right here. And it's got to be 52 pixels in height. 52 pixels in height. And the width is going to be in here. So let's throw it inside the welcome back frame. fill the container like that. Oops, and I forgot to add a border radius. So this is email. So let's add a stroke. And this is also probably going to be a gray color. That's too dark. It's probably going to be like this. So let me add this as a gray. Change this from dark gray to regular gray. Add a border radius. And we are in business. This email address also is too dark, so it's going to be a gray like that. Actually, maybe that's too dark as well. Something like that. Color is okay. Let's have a look. Let's just take a step back, see how we did. So it's definitely not exact, but it's definitely really close. So I centered all the elements. This is like the main section, and it looks pretty aligned. And I think I'm going to stop the video there. We covered a lot. We messed with components again, created variants of the components. I showed you how we can actually use a lot of Figma community resources. So in this case, someone had put together the social login buttons, and we messed around with a lot of colors. As you can see, we added a bunch of color styles here. We made a email address input, which again always starts with the text layer. You add throw some auto layout, some spacing and padding there. The button we were able to reuse, except it had a specific height of 52 pixels. And of course, we relied heavily on inspecting our actual website to pull sort of the actual color values and spacing values. But let's stop there because we did a great job. Hopefully you were able to follow along. If not, feel free to pause the video anytime. And yeah, if you have been enjoying this video series, please consider supporting me again at buymeacoffee.com/Carl Lee. And I will see you in the next video where we will tackle this sign in with Google page.